40 brutal truths about human nature can solve 93% of your problems, because an astonishingly large share of our difficulties does not begin with money, work, or misfortune. It begins with people, with false expectations, overlooked patterns, and the attempt to explain behavior that has long been obvious. Those who understand how people really think and act recognize many problems earlier. And that is exactly where the first brutal truth begins. First, most people think about you far less often than you believe. While you are still wondering whether your comment sounded strange, the other person is already preoccupied with how they themselves came across. Everyone is the main character in their own movie. Everyone else usually plays only a supporting role. Second, people judge your mistakes by your character and their own mistakes by the circumstances. If you are late, you are unreliable. If they are late, traffic, an important phone call, or the line at the checkout was to blame. We find reasons for ourselves. With others, we quickly turn it into a question of character. Third, many people do not want an honest opinion. They want agreement in honest packaging. That is why they ask you to be open and explain to you a few seconds later why your answer is wrong. They did not want to know what you think. They wanted to hear that they were already right. Fourth, confidence is surprisingly often mistaken for competence. In a group, a convincing person with a wrong answer can have more influence than several people with quiet doubts. Our brain recognizes certainty faster than knowledge. That is exactly why some people seem particularly intelligent until they talk for long enough. Fifth, envy rarely sounds like envy. Most of the time it sounds reasonable. Isn't that too risky? Do you really want to put yourself through that? Some people are not warning you about failure. They are warning you about a success that would call something in their own life into question. Sixth, a boundary without consequences is not a boundary to many people. If someone crosses it again and again, and all that follows is another conversation, the person learns one thing above all: nothing happens. Seventh, not every apology means remorse. Some people only regret that you are angry, that you are withdrawing, or that they now have to live with the consequences. Remorse is not recognized by someone's tone of voice, but by their behavior afterward. Eighth, how someone treats you while they need something from you says little about their character. It becomes interesting as soon as there is no longer any advantage waiting and no one is watching. Ninth, an argument often stops being about the truth. It becomes about not appearing to be the loser. That is why people defend positions in front of others that they would have abandoned long ago in private. 10th, the opinion of a group changes what people consider to be true. When everyone praises a bad idea, even reasonable people begin to doubt their own judgment, not out of conviction, but out of fear of standing alone. 11th, criticism hits especially hard when it touches a doubt that you already have yourself. An absurd insult disappears quickly. A casual remark about a secret insecurity remains. 12th, people also judge a statement according to who says it. Ordinary advice sounds profound when it comes from a respected person. The same thought is easily overlooked when it comes from someone without status. 13th, someone who constantly emphasizes being honest, loyal, or particularly intelligent has not yet provided any proof. Qualities that are truly present rarely need to be announced. 14th, our memory does not store experiences like a camera. Every time we remember something, the memory changes slightly. That is why two people can describe the same argument completely differently and still both be convinced that they are telling the truth. 15th, people do not only want to be loved, they want to be needed. That is why some people do not help solely out of generosity. They create dependency so that their place in another person's life remains secure. 16th, people pay closer attention to tone than to content. A correct sentence in the wrong tone can provoke more resistance than a false statement that sounds pleasant. 17th, The more often we hear something, the more credible it appears. Repetition feels familiar, and familiarity is surprisingly easily mistaken for truth by the brain. 18th, people notice losses more strongly than gains. Losing €100 usually hurts more than winning €100 brings joy. That is why we often hold on to things for too long, simply to avoid admitting a loss. 19th, we prefer to search for information that confirms our opinion. We critically examine anything that contradicts us. What fits our view, however, we often believe immediately. 20th, people overestimate how well they can see through others. A friendly face seems honest, while a nervous look seems suspicious. Yet we often see only our own expectations, not the person. 21st, the more effort we have invested in something, the harder it is for us to give it up. This applies to projects, beliefs, and relationships that stopped working long ago. 22nd, people become accustomed to good things astonishingly quickly. What was still a great success yesterday becomes normal today. That is why satisfaction constantly moves a little farther forward. 23rd, we like to attribute our own successes to our abilities, while blaming external circumstances for our failures. With others, however, we are quicker to see luck behind success and personal weaknesses behind failure. 24th, people make many decisions based on feelings and only afterward look for a reasonable explanation. That is why we often believe we have thought something through thoroughly, even though we are merely justifying our decision after the fact. 25th, people do not always ask for advice because they are looking for a solution. Often, they only want confirmation or the feeling of being understood. Advice is not always welcome. 26th, people rarely respect what is available without limits. Attention, help, and time often lose value when they can always be obtained without effort. 27th, the more strongly someone tries to control how others see them, the less free they become. In the end, they are no longer living their life, but merely managing the impression they make. 28th, people sometimes reject good ideas simply because the ideas did not come from them. 29th, many people do not listen in order to understand. They are primarily occupied with preparing their own response. 30th, attention is not automatically affection. Some people watch you closely because they admire you. Others do it because they are comparing, controlling, or waiting for you to make a mistake. 31st, people often show you who they are early on. The only problem is that we like to treat small signs as exceptions. A condescending joke, a casual lie, or the way someone talks about people who are absent is excused. Later, we suddenly call the same behavior unexpected. 32nd, many relationships last not because of closeness, but because of habit. Two people remain connected even though there is hardly any trust, joy, or genuine interest left. Not because it is good, but because the familiar is less frightening than the unknown. 33rd, people often do not give you what you need, but what they themselves understand love to be. That is why care can mean closeness to one person and control to another. 34th, some people hold on to you even though they do not treat you well. They do not necessarily miss you, but the comfort you gave them. 35th, people often return to things that harm them simply because they are familiar. What is familiar feels safer than a change whose outcome no one knows. 36th, people often criticize, especially harshly in others, what they do not allow themselves to do. Sometimes it is not your behavior that bothers them, but your freedom. 37th, many people do not fear failure itself. They fear that others will see them fail. As soon as no one is watching, they suddenly dare to do things they avoided for years. The task was not the prison, but the audience in their head. 38th, almost everyone considers themselves more objective, reasonable, and fair than they actually are. This very conviction is what makes blind spots so persistent. Those who believe they have none protect them most reliably. 39th, Some people need a false image of you because otherwise they would have to question their own behavior. That is why you can explain yourself as well as possible and still be misunderstood. Not every misconception is meant to be corrected. 40th. Most of your anger is caused not only by the behavior of others, but by the story you tell yourself about it. An ignored call becomes rejection. A critical remark becomes a lack of respect. A farewell becomes proof that you were not enough. Sometimes people truly do hurt us, but afterward, our own mind often takes care of the rest.